In a socially distanced world, Design United is an optimistic digital platform for collaborative design and connection.
This platform, Design United, was started amidst the pandemic in March 2020. We would like to share a short film about Design United.
Design United was created in March 2020 during a period of intense lockdown and quarantine measures within the region. The aim behind Design United was to create an optimistic space for regional dialogue, connections, collaborations, and opportunities for young regional designers and design practices. A much needed network of support and peer mentorship during these uncertain times. Talented young designers and design studios working on design innovation with an approach that is relevant to our South Asian region have been invited to be a part of the platform. Today's conversation is a part of the Mentorship Series. Mentorship and constructive criticism is essential for the growth of designers. Design United's Mentorship Series design practice is with two renowned practices from the region, Mindspace, India, and Kerry Architects, Singapore and Australia, with two exceptional designers and inspirational mentors joining us today, architect Sanjay Mohe, joining us from Bengaluru, India, and architect Tanuj Goenka, joining us from Singapore, sharing their experiences and their design journey. I'm Varuna Shashidhar, founder principal of the Regional Landscape Practice, VSLA, based in Bengaluru. I'm supported by my wonderful DU and VSLA team in this endeavor, along with Claywork Spaces. Renowned Indian architect Sanjay Mohe was born and brought up in Mumbai and graduated in architecture from Sir J.J. College of Architecture in 1976 and went on to work with legendary architect Charles Correa. Mindspace was established in 2004 by architect Mohe, Vasuki Prakash and Suryanarayanan. It is currently run by architects Suryanarayanan, architect Medappa, and architects Mohe. Mindspace strives towards a more sustainable approach towards architecture, and their ideals revolve around the 5 elements of nature. Climate and context are the 2 main factors around which their design is centered. Instead of aping the West, Mindspace strives to design spaces responsive to local climate. Their extensive built portfolio comprises of many renowned award-winning institutions. Some of their key projects include an extension and hostel at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Titan Integrity, which is the Titan headquarters at Bangalore, JNCAR Auditorium, Bangalore. Mindspace has won numerous awards, and architect Sanjay Mohe has been awarded by the prestigious JK Cement's Great Master Award in 2019. It's such an honor to welcome the distinguished and inspiring architect Sanjay Mohe to Design Conversation. I'm also privileged to introduce and welcome architect Tanuj Goenka. Architect Tanuj Goenka is a director at Kerry Architects, Singapore. Kerry Architects is an award-winning architectural and design practice established in 1979 by renowned Australian architect Kerry. From its first studio in Singapore, the practice has evolved over the last 40 years with a project base that is growing from its original Southeast Asia location to most continents of the world. Its second studio was founded in Perth, Western Australia in 1995. Together, the 2 studios comprise approximately 75 predominantly professional staff with half in each of these locations. The practice has 6 directors between the two studios. The practice offers a full range of architectural services from master planning to project delivery and prides itself on this continuity through the life of a project, which underpins every successful built outcome. The firm is committed to innovative and regionally appropriate architectural solutions and has extensive experience with resort and city hotels, commercial developments, education, the performing arts, recreational facilities, and residential architecture, along with restoration projects. The practice received the prestigious Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 2001 for the Dattai Resort in Langwaki, Malaysia. In addition, the firm has received many international and regional design awards for completed projects, many of which have been widely published in the architecture and design media. Indian architect Tanuj graduated from the School of Architecture, Ahmedabad in 1997. He relocated to Singapore in 1998 and joined the Singapore office of Kerry Hill Architects in 1999. During his time with Kerry Hill Architects, he has been involved in a number of projects, which include master planning, institutional, hospitality, and multi-residential design. He became an associate at Kerry Hill Architects in 2008 and a director in 2014. Architect Tanuj relocated to Bhutan from 2003 to 2006 to oversee the construction of a series of hotels for Aman. Since his return from Bhutan, he's been working on projects in Croatia, Montenegro, Turkey, Jordan, Qatar, Thailand, and Malaysia. More recently, he has been heading the KHA design and documentation teams for projects in China, Maldives, Saudi Arabia. It's such an honor to welcome both architects Sanjay Mohe and architect Tanuj to Design Conversation. We would request architect Sanjay Mohe to please share his design journey with us. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and welcome, Tanuj. Good to share this presentation along with you. We'll just start with some of the ideas with which we sort of, work in our office, develop our design philosophy. Actually, most of our projects are designed around human kind of activities, and humanizing space has been a main pursuit of our work. In order to achieve that, just one. In order to achieve that, you have to respect memories, and the memories become extremely important, and we try to create places for the memories. I mean, sort of have a collection of memories built within the environment. Rituals are part of our culture. We have a close connection between the rituals and we try to balance between the logic and the faith, and that's something which goes on all the time. So working with rituals and responding to ritualistic path, which Korea talks about, is again a very important feature of our work. Now, most of the rituals are built around the climate, because it's more like a response to the climate. And the spaces which are kind of threshold spaces, which are neither inside nor outside, it's kind of an in-between space. That's something which needs porosity. It's something which is part of our climate. And finally, in this whole hectic world where there is so much of chaos and so much of restlessness, you need to have a pause to sit and contemplate. And the whole presentation is built around these 5 aspects. So I'll just start with idea of humanizing space. So when you start designing, you start imagining activities, and sometimes it happens as you design, sometimes it happens accidentally. So in this case, when we did this paving, we never imagined that this space would be used like this, or even like this, because this is something which is again part of the rituals, and we never imagined these spaces would be like that. But when we start designing, we start looking at different activities and then try to create a kind of space around that activity, which would complement, that particular ambience. So you start working with these different kind of volumes, different kind of light qualities, and start connecting those activities, and finally weave a story out of it. And this has been the pursuit all the time to achieve that in most of our projects. Now, when you talk about idea of a classroom, now this is something which is, the idea of classroom comes much, much later. The first thing is to, have a transfer of knowledge from the teacher to the student, and what would be the right space for that. So this is Shantiniketan. You really don't need a kind of a enclosure for that. It can just happen under a tree. Or traditionally, it used to happen in the pavilion, where the master would be sitting on a platform, students would be sitting around it. The breeze going through you, you listen to the birds and feel the breeze around you. And that's something which actually became a place for transferring knowledge. And then when we started working on some of the projects where we try to look at the idea of a classroom, we try to give that option of either sitting in the classroom in an enclosed space whenever it is required, or sit in a semi-open space, or sit under a tree and then work. So you give different options for the activities and then try to respond to that. And that's how the whole space kind of comes up, and you have these kind of places where you have these options. Now, I studied in JJ College, and this road, DN Road, is just next to that college. And throughout the day, this road is so active, full of activities, that you never realize that it is surrounded by these kind of buildings, because the activities take over, the sound, the noise, and there's so many things happening around, and you never notice that these kind of buildings exist there. Only when in the middle of the night, we used to work late night on some of these designs, and then walk on the middle of the road, then you would notice this. So it's about the activities which really take over the architectural space and start dictating it. So when you design architecture for the people, how do you really respond to all this entire spectrum? So you have a place at one end which could be a meditative place, and other end it could be full of crowd, full of activities, full of noise. So it's if you're looking at a meditation center as against a railway station, and then you sort of have this entire spectrum, and you have to respond to the safety, the activity level, the sound levels, and the emotional engagement. So as a designer, you really have to look at all these aspects and try to see how do you stretch. Suppose you are designing, let's say, a school. This school has to have a place like a library and meditation place. So you need to have a quieter place, as well as when it comes to some social gathering, the parents come together, it has to stretch up to the other end. Probably when it comes to house, you would actually have a quieter place and a gathering, but there might be some house where whether they entertain guests very often, and that's the time it has to extend even further. So you start working on these. So you take a space and try to see whether it can go to the right where you have this quieter zone, or it goes to the left where you have a very energetic zone. And then with that, we start imagining, we start designing, and this is Titan corporate office, where this spine, it is actually designed to have a lot of their product launches and things like that. So this becomes extremely active space. So during certain times, it becomes as active as that. But at the same time, we wanted it to be very meditative kind of a place. So you have a choice of, absorbing that and changing the space into different. So all these spaces, when you look at them, it has the ability to absorb the crowd. At the same time, you can be alone and feel that quietude. This entire office space is designed almost like a veranda. So you have a choice of sitting out and interacting with your colleagues, or you can sit quiet and work. So it gives you all those choices. And the entire skin of the building is again designed to absorb the people. So you can have a lot of spillover. There could be gathering spaces here. And at the same time, so that's what I'm talking about, working with the entire spectrum from one end to another. Now, when we look at most of our traditional houses, it's about ambiguity against the defined areas. And this is a house of one of our colleagues, his ancestral house. And we had been there. And, this is the kind of a space that you see. But when we went there, they arranged for the lunch, and this whole space became like that. After the lunch, we were relaxing, spreading some of these mattresses and relaxing in that veranda. But when there was a wedding in that same house, the whole space changed. So this space has the ability to absorb different activities, and that's what we look at in all our projects. So you have this space in Care College Trichy, which becomes like this, this is in JNC. This is a research lab, and the same space becomes like a gathering space here. Or this is again another research lab where this area, which is a mutually shaded court, more out of a climatic requirement. But the same thing becomes a space for gathering cross. Another aspect about it is about absorption against elimination. And this is something which we have been taught most of the time in our colleges about minimalism. And that always becomes like, you try to remove things till what remains is something which is so pristine and something which is of most importance. And this is more of a Japanese culture with tatami mats, absolutely minimal, very, very less furniture. And it is something which is part of their culture and part of they are most comfortable in this. And that's how Tadawando designs his work like that. We do get carried away by this because this is how we have been taught in all the colleges, everyone. So just to be minimal, but really, if you look at our culture, it's about absorption. It's not about elimination. And this is something which is so much part of our system that the traffic moves through this, and there are so many activities, and there seems to be some kind of agreement between the two that it seems to work. There are some, for the outsiders, it's an absolute chaotic thing, but for the insiders, there is a system with which it works, and it works pretty well. And then finally, we get absorbed into this whole background, and we sort of sometimes lose our identity and become part of the background. And that's what is our culture. So it's about absorbing memories, responding to that, and how do we really work with that? So whenever you do a house, you sort of try to make it minimal. And this is a house which we had done almost about 20 years back. It started like this. As you see, it is not minimal, but at the same time, there's not, this is how it started with. But over the time, it became as crowded as this. And this is what typically happens in every house, because for the person who owns the house, who occupies the house, each object is a collection of a memory. It tells him a story, tells him or tells her a story, and they value it a lot. So it's for you as a designer or you as an outsider, it might look cluttered, it might look terrible. But for the person, each object is telling a story and needs to have a place. And this is how it becomes a collection of memories. And as an architect, I think you have to respond to that, because what you feel and what the other person feels is totally different. So whenever we do houses, we keep that in mind. But again, there is a conflict between our training, our upbringing, the kind of images that you keep seeing in the magazines and all, and that has some kind of impact on us. So whenever we do, these are some of the very recent works where we try to create those places for memories. The scale increases, so the response to the spaces also increases. So it would be nice to see how these things grow over the time and how it absorbs different activities, different collection. In this case, the scale of the house has increased even further. This is a huge house, and this is the entry to that house. But the idea was again same: how to scale it down, how to make it human, though it's an enormous house in terms of requirements, in terms of activities. So we were trying to balance between this large scale and try to make it as human as possible. And as I said, we would like to really see how this house would age and how it would absorb memories and how it would respond to the ideas which we were talking about. There is always, as I said in the beginning, there's a conflict between technology and faith. And we carry these baggage with us. We have a technology, but then we still have that faith. So there is always a struggle, always a balance. Many times we do these cutting edge research labs, but we have to follow Vastu, and we have to follow certain northeast corner has to be like that. But this is part of our culture, and we have to sort of respond to that. You don't have to complain about it. This picture I always give reference to. This is one of the tractors, but there is the symbol of bulls, and this is something, the work which was traditionally done by these animals is being replaced by machine. But as a farmer, you still worship them, still do puja, and then you start your work. And this is typically what we are. And that's something which is very important. And that's why the idea of this whole ritualistic path comes in. So these are the rituals. This is something which is part of our life, part of our culture. And this is something which we noticed in Kerala. This is Trichur temple. And it's quite interesting because you sort of take a walk around this, and there is an inner court, and there is this kalasha kind of a thing. And as you walk around, there is one small opening somewhere here through which that kalasha is framed. So I had seen that. Just show you that picture. Yeah, this is what that triangle is, and through which you get a frame of this. And this triangle must be just about 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot kind of thing. But when we went there last year, this ritual had started happening because somebody had put this small structure, and everyone brings one small stone, puts it there, and looks through that opening and prays for that kalasha. And these are the rituals which sort of keep happening as part of our culture. And this is what gives energy to architecture. And this is what makes architecture, it takes it to the next level. And that's where these ritualistic paths become extremely important, which Korea always spoke about it. And this is what it is, something which happens in between the structure rather than within the structure, because our climate allows us to use these in between spaces, which doesn't happen in the cold countries. So that's the reason the church becomes more introvert, a large volume, the idea of divine space captured through volumes, whereas here we try to achieve it, through these varying unfolding spaces and keep discovering these. And this is what happens in between that. And we have different shrines to pray, different rituals, and the light quality and shade starts becoming important. Now, during our college days, we had these, we didn't have luxury of using these walkthroughs and things like that. So we always referred to series of sketches just to unfold that idea. And this is by Gordon Cullen, Townscape, where you see this and then you go closer and you see that next column, you go close and see the carving on the column. Then you walk further, you see the church, you go close to church, and then you see that opening, and through that you come out and you sort of open it up. So this is something which we start. This is Satyajit Ray's sketches. Before doing any film, he would actually capture that and then only start filming. So this is something which we had to do because we didn't have, as I said, we didn't have computers to either you build physical models or do these sketches, and we started doing that, which we still do it, and this is where you have this unfolding sequence. This is in Care College, where you create that path of discovery or whatever ritualistic path. So you go from here, go across, and keep discovering thing, and this is what it looks like. So you walk through this, go through that. There is this, you really don't know what is happening behind that. So there is a kind of suspense, kind of curiosity. So it starts unfolding till it comes to this larger space, and then again you start walking towards the other side and walk through that, go through this, go through that small opening, comes to this tree, and get back. So this is the space which I was talking about, which changes, and these are the recent pictures which were sent by students during lockdown, the way it is aging. I'll show you about this Sai temple, which we did recently in Trichy. We have done one temple in Bangalore, and the Swamiji who was instrumental in this temple, his house, where he was born, it's in Trichy, and this is the house which the management wanted to restore it, make it like a museum or a kind of again collection of his belongings, and then restore it, and then build a temple behind it. So this house plus the plot behind was what was bought, and this was the road. On the left side is a nice water canal, which looks like this. This water keeps varying. Sometimes it is there, sometimes it is much less. And next to this, there is one Tulsi Vrindavan where the Swamiji's ashes were put there. So that also became a sacred place. So responding to all that, that was something happening here. This is what was a given thing to us with this house as a traditional house. This is how it looked like inside when we saw it for the first time. And then behind there was a court with a nice well. And this was part of the site, and the one behind as well, which is this very long and narrow. And then we started working on it, water canal, trees, existing trees here, very long and narrow site. And then there is one small Tulsi thing here. And then this actually became an access to start the thing. And we started responding to that, creating a plaza, opening. This is where that well is, what I showed you. So we opened this and created a water body there to open it up. This became a kind of a threshold space. So we created these two walls to enclose that. You clean your feet here and then go in, and then this was a guest house they wanted for a few people to stay. And then this temple which came up, and then we started developing this as an entire sequence of unfolding images, the sections where the light comes in, the different sections. And this is how this space was, and we opened this and inserted this water body, which became a very interesting space when we saw people using it. So these were very initial sketches. We opened up this so people can walk in, look at the belongings of Swamiji, and then go further and go to the temple. So this is how that transition space happened. This is that old well which opened up, and then these were initial sort of designed of the way the light would come into the space. And then this inauguration happened, and one of the rituals of inauguration is to have this kalasha here, and all the people go there and do abhishek there. And then the main deity has to be exactly below that, axially under that. So this thing was built mainly for everyone to climb up and do that puja. And it was amazing. This was such a quiet place, but when we eventually came there during inauguration, we suddenly found people walking from all over the place and then forming this huge queues, and that was exciting. We couldn't even enter into the place. So this is that in between space, and then you see the temple. And then this water body became almost like a sacred place. People were sort of almost everyone wanted to touch that water. Now, just after this, the lockdown happened. So after that, we couldn't go there and take pictures as well. Part of it is done. Part of it is still going to happen. But as a ritualistic path, I wanted to show this project and the kind of people involvement, which is actually you design your buildings for the people, for this thing to happen. So if you see their faces and the kind of faith that they have, and it feels very satisfying just to see that. And these were some pictures which we got a little later. Actually, we have not visited it during last almost 8-9 months. But this is that house. Needs to, a lot of detailing still has to come in. But this is that water body, the front part, and then the. So these threshold spaces is something which our climate demands. For us, worshipping a threshold is a big ritual, and everyone does that traditionally because you are entering from outside to inside. And this is something which is that particular moment of entering from outside to inside becomes extremely important. And that gets celebrated. And that's why whether it's a small house or bigger house, you take pride in it because it is your house, at your belonging, and there's something very, very important happening inside. But that space, that threshold space, which can belong to outside as well as to inside. And that's what something which fascinates us. And we try to create that in every project. How do you create that space which when you are there, you wonder whether it belongs to outside or to inside. So when we were doing this school, which is for Brigade, and this was one of these mango orchards kind of thing. So we tried to save almost most of the trees. Few 5-6 trees had to go wherever this building came. But we wanted to create that transparency, that openness, and then float the building above, have this landscape going through, and allow different activities to happen here, because we felt that education doesn't even happen in the classroom. It has to happen under the trees as well. So that would become an extension of your learning experience. And then this path starts from one end and starts climbing up across the spine. It becomes amphitheater, then goes up, turns around and starts climbing up again. And at this point, it becomes part of the facade. So the children, when they walk up and down, they are witnessing even the outside world. And from outside, when you look, you see the students, running up and down, and that becomes that we wanted it as almost a dynamic facade with the people participation. And then you have a lot of these codes where the classes would be conducted, and then we're just responding to these volumes and creating that transparency across with the different kind of sections, which so it's not like a ground floor or a first floor, just the spaces flow from one to another, and eventually it becomes part of the facade. So you come in from there, start climbing up, and then that becomes part of the facade. And these are the different volumes, different details. But that porosity is something which is fundamental to our climate. And this is something that you allow the breeze to go through. And this is again completed during the lockdown. So the admissions are, the school is not yet open. Some kids had come to take admission. So that time these photographs were taken. So hopefully we want to see this with full of kids running around and enjoying these spaces. That's the amphitheater. That's the staircase looking across the light coming in. The way you would sort of see, we wanted this sill to be as low as possible, so even the students sitting at the back would be able to see the trees. And then how the ventilation would come, even when the class is closed during the night, you would want that breeze, the air to move, and when you come in the morning, it would still feel fresh. These were to take care of the western sun, these fins. And we did the simulation to see how the sun would move in different time, and that's how the ventilation happens through these openings, and these are the pictures. And the last one is about the pause, the meditative kind of a thing. How do you really, create those quieter places? And I Am Bangalore by Mr. Doshi is probably the best example where you feel that idea of meditative pause. When you are there, you have some sense of a peace, some sense of tranquility. And we have been fortunate to work on this building and trying to sort of add a few things without disturbing what Mr. Doshi wanted to preserve, and trying to be as sensitive, as quiet as possible. But what I'll quickly show is this memorial, what we did for Dr. Anji Reddy in Hyderabad. There is a video on this called Presence of Absence, so I won't go too much into detail because there's no time. But there's a research center, and this is beyond that was his house. So he would take that path to go to his house, and he would take some of these visitors, including some Nobel laureates and all, along this path while going to his house for lunch. And then there was one people tree here. He would talk about it. So this path symbolized his life, which started as a farmer's son. Very rough in the beginning, and became a philanthropist, became a scientist, became a rich man, and became a philanthropist later. So it starts from very rough stones to grass, and then this wall also almost symbolizes that starts from low, becomes big. These openings also starts with small and becomes big, and becomes part of this series of trees. This is set into a grid of Gulmohar trees, taking advantage of that. This is another set of trees which again, we moved this wall from there to there and created this space as part of the scientists where they can walk during lunchtime. And this path again symbolizes his life. On one end is his bike. When he started his career, he used to use that. And the other end is his first Mercedes, which he was proud of. So as you actually climb up, you go towards that Mercedes, and there are different paths. So you have 1, 2. There are 4 kind of accesses where there are the collection of his belongings are kept here. This is the path he used to take. This is where his ashes are kept. So this is almost creates a void, and when you look through, you see this void, a reflection of that. And during lunchtime, when the scientists take this path, they just get a glimpse of this, because a lot of them have worked with him and get connected and get energized. And you have these lot of benches here. When you can sit, there are motivational inscriptions onto that. Yeah, so it's kind of sense of discovery. You go there, you see this series of frames. You come in and you discover the whole space. And I'll just quickly run through this. So that's the path with that people tree there and the house behind that, starting from rough, going to this is where you see that void with the water. And again, you rediscover this. That's the bike. The other end is a car. So you actually, this idea of giving something, which he did throughout his life, either it is a knowledge or money, but you can touch it before you enter, and that's what is nice about it. And you again rediscover it. So that's the space. That's the void. And as you walk through, you walk down, so this water level comes closer to your eye level, and then it feels much nicer there. And then you don't see the bottom of this void, where you feel that sense of sense of loss. This is what is looking back, and as you walk, this diagonal cut sort of creates that link as you walk on that walk where that car and the bike is. So that's the visual connection across. The idea of giving, that he just did a lot of philanthropic work. He started alone and then carried people along, and then finally it became stars. So in the night, this whole thing gets lit up, and then you feel as if there's there's a connection with a divine kind of thing. So that's the path. That's that people tree looking back. That's his belongings, which tells the whole story. There are these benches with inspirational quotes, not only from him, from different scientists, looking back. And this is where his philanthropic work, it talks about all those engraved into the wall. That's the car as you saw. Even a common young chap who is working there would walk up and feel that it's possible. Looking back. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Architect Mohe, for the inspiring presentation and taking us through the principles that guide your architecture, your methodology of working, and the wonderful projects that you've shared with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
We request Architect Tanuj from Kerry Hill Architects to please share your presentation and design journey with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to present some of our work this afternoon. Thank you, Sanjay, for an inspiring presentation. So I'll start with an introduction to our studio, followed by I'll present 3 of our projects which have different stories and journeys behind them. Kerry Hill established the Singapore studio in 1979. We are one practice based in 2 locations. In Singapore, we work in a converted 1920s shop house. I joined the practice soon after graduating from Ahmedabad in 1998. We work hard during the week, but at the same time, religiously wind down on a Friday evening. In our work, developing an experiential quality of a space and an intuitive approach is more important than theoretical speculation. We like to think of our work as being current, but filtered through a sieve of traditional values, building with a sense of belonging to wherever we are designing it. Architecture, we believe, takes time, and the process of making architecture needs to be deliberately slowed down. An appropriate contextual response to every brief, every site is very important for us. As I mentioned earlier, we have limited the theoretical ambitions of our practice to a few qualities. One of these is exactitude, and the other is authenticity. Exactitude in our projects means editing and distilling the design till there is neither too much or too little of anything, where one material pays respect to another. Authenticity, on the other hand, is not so easy to read. It has to do with a genuine origin. It is felt as much as it is seen, and we believe it evolves through intuition as much as through critical observation. Building appropriately is also very important to us. As future architects, it's very important to ask the question if one is in the business of architecture or practicing architecture as a business. The most unifying strategy in our work is the plan, which is very important. Plans embody abstract notions of building forms and volumes, tradition and culture, all of which shape our buildings and inform the appropriateness of architecture. We extensively use models as a design and presentation tool, and our models have been exhibited in Tokyo and Shanghai. Over the last 40 plus years, our work has taken us from Nevis in the West to Japan in the East and across various building typologies. This afternoon, I'm presenting 3 projects which represent 3 different contexts, 3 different project durations, and 3 very distinct journeys that the studio has been through. All 3 of these projects, I hope, embody the principles that I have just articulated. I'll start with Maldives, which is a project currently under construction. This journey was a short journey. It's only 5 years long. The project is opening in the next 3 months. Maldives is our first island hotel that is under construction. Over the years, we have been waiting for the right project to come our way that would allow us to break away from the expected way of building on an island next to water. For all our projects, we like to go back to first principles, draw inspiration from the site and its history, and explore a strong, contemporary, and appropriate response to the design brief. The site that we were given is located 40 minutes north of Malé Airport. And the first stage of design involved actually creating the site in the middle of the ocean. So we worked with marine engineers from Singapore to understand how the ocean currents work, how the prevailing breezes work, in order to shape the islands and design the islands to work with the natural elements. These are a few diagrams which show the evolution of the site itself and how it was influenced by the ocean currents to finally achieve the shapes that are being built. So once we designed the shape, we took a decision that we are going to embrace the idea that the islands are man-made, like a lot of the islands in Maldives, not try to make them feel or look, the shape look natural, and embellish the man-made nature of these islands. So a few images showing the islands taking shape. That was the final master plan, which is a series of 4 islands from one end to the other. It's around 2.5 kilometers long. And it is a 100-room hotel for the Ritz-Carlton. The islands, as well as the architecture, they are very simple geometric forms and shapes. And as I mentioned, they express their man-made nature and a pragmatic response to the oceanographic conditions. The islands taking shape on the reef starts with a bund of sand. You start to understand the scale of the islands that are being reclaimed. And slowly over a few months, the site starts to take shape. And is held in place with granite boulders forming revetments. The site had 2 very distinct faces to it. On the left is the calm lagoon, and on the right is the open ocean. And the shape of the island reacted to these natural currents. So as you can see, the side of the island which is facing the open ocean was more protected, was more solid, where most of the walls were, and the wide sweeping sandy beaches were towards the calmer lagoon on the inside. Once the land reclamation was completed, the buildings were pegged on the site. This is showing some of the buildings, the guest room, as well as another suite, and I'll get into more detail a little later. And we also transplanted the landscape from a neighboring island, which was being cleared for an airport project. So all of the landscape was, most of the landscape was transplanted from that island to this. So the hotel is designed across 3 land masses, and the fourth being the water island, which is on the left of the screen. As the site is tight, we wanted to explore different forms for the shape of the guest room itself. And because of the tight site, we came to the conclusion that the circular form of the guest room and some of the public spaces allows for these surfaces to sit comfortably in the bright Maldivian sun and dissolve the perceivable mass of the building. The circular plan also allowed each unit to be individually oriented to achieve pristine views and ensure total privacy. Some initial models showing the guest room. Each of the overwater guest room has a private pool and a sun deck, but very simple forms over water and on land. Few more views of the guest room itself. And each of these structures have been designed to form very simple shelters from which to enjoy the natural spectacle of Maldives. Anyone who comes to this property is there for what Maldives offers you, which is the views and also the learning on the surface and in the ocean. While designing the project, we were quite aware of the fact that we need to introduce sustainable features within the project itself. So the shape and the form of the building was influenced by the angle of the solar panels that needed to be installed on the roof. And close to over 30% of the energy of the project is from solar. The detailing has been kept very simple, and exposed channels, as you see in the screen, are neatly inlaid into the cladding and bring the water down from the roof. So these guest rooms either form a ring of rooms over water, forming the water island with the spa in the middle, or on land, they are located on private alcoves and smaller beaches, forming smaller community of guest rooms. We have used cross-laminated timber for the walls and the roofs, and this together with the widespread use of photovoltaic helps in reducing a very low carbon footprint for the project. And the CLT also allows us to keep the construction to be quite precise and reduces the amount of cutting and in situ works on the property itself. Each one of these 80 square meter structures takes 4 days to complete on site because of the assembly of the CLT. So in addition to the guest rooms, a lot of the public area buildings are also built with the same CLT material. And we have developed a series of very simple pavilions and frame structures which have been used at different scales across the project to form the public areas and other buildings of the project. A view showing the arrival pontoon where the boats would drop the guests off. Another view showing one of the restaurants, again kept very simple. The buildings are a shelter for the guests to enjoy the natural spectacle of Maldives. All of these pavilions are carefully articulated to maintain their visual simplicity. The center of the project is the main public area island, which has the hotel's main pool on the right, and it has the restaurant pavilions on the left. And the pavilions, like the guest rooms and the public areas, again have been kept very simple. Another view of the pavilions under construction. So they're all assembled on site, so it reduces the amount of waste and on-site work, reduces the amount of pollution. That's one of the restaurants which sits over water. Another one at the Chinese restaurant seen at night, which glows like a lantern over water. The main hotel pool is a 33-meter disc of water which reflects the sun and the sky, and the bar of the hotel has been designed to wrap around it. That's the pool under construction, and we've been careful about the color of the pool surface so that it matches the color of the open ocean. We've also enjoyed putting other elements, designing other elements in the project, like the Children's Club, which is a world created for the children in the center of the island. So there are different destinations that have been created within the project itself. So the Kids Club is designed almost like a cave, which encloses an internal courtyard where the kids can play, and they have their own pool and water slide. We are working with Maldivian artists to draw and on the walls of the Kids Club itself. And Ritz-Carlton has a very interesting program lined up of how they will use this facility. Showing the same space under construction. So just like the guest room, the spa, which is in the center of the water island, is a circular form which looks inward into a courtyard. And with the lighting designers, we have designed the spa facade in such a way that it prolongs and extends the sunset around the project. So the lighting has been designed so that it works with the normal sunrise and sunset times and glows to prolong the sunset itself. This is an old slide, but it shows the spa under construction with the guest rooms around it. Another view of the spa. So the property, as I mentioned, is scheduled to open in May this year, and it has been an interesting journey for the office to design something which is for the Maldives, and it breaks the traditional way of building in the Maldives and gets away from it. The second project I'd like to show is Aman Yangyun. in Shanghai. This project, the office has been working for close to 10 years, and we continue to work on the larger community around Aman Yangyun. I think we'll continue to work on it for the next 10, 15 years. The story of Aman Yangyun begins about 25 years ago, 700 kilometers southwest of Shanghai. A construction of a large dam threatened to destroy villages which contained very ancient Ming and Qing dynasty houses, as well as a mature camphor forest. Our client began a private initiative to rescue these valuable heritage, documenting and dismantling over 50 of these houses. Every brick, tile, stone, and structural timber was transported to Shanghai, where they were stored in warehouses and reassembled with great care and skill. In addition to the houses, 10,000 camphor trees, many with trunks over 1 meter in diameter, were transplanted to a tree nursery close to the project site. In 2009, we were asked to imagine how this collection of ancient houses could be resurrected and woven together with the trees into a master plan for a 43-hectare site on the outskirts of Shanghai. The master plan consists of 4 quadrants separated by waterways. So Aman Yangyun was conceived as a contemporary walled village in a forest, and a riverside avenue leads guests to the arrival. Spaces unfold at a variety of scales, becoming more intimate as we move from the main avenue towards the hotel arrival or the residential villas. This slide shows the location of the hotel and 24 suites. The Nanshufang, which is the library, which used to be the school of the village before it was dismantled and moved to Shanghai, and now has become the cultural heart of the property. And 43 villas make up the Aman Yangyun community, out of which 18 are private and the rest are part of the hotel. The master plan creates opportunities for every venue to have a distinct landscape setting. From the arrival to the hotel, which is strong cubic form with a glazed lantern on top, which glows at night and floods the interior with sunlight during the day. We've kept the entrance quite modest, so it contrasts and heightens the sense of drama as you enter the main reception space. The interiors are paneled with finely crafted screens, which we designed for the project, made from Namu. It's a gold-flecked wood that was traditionally used for noble Chinese buildings. And this geometric screen pattern is an abstraction of a traditional Chinese cloud motif. We're using these screens, and for most of our projects, we design from master plan all the way to the architecture, the interior, the lights, down to the soap dish in the rooms. We are involved in all scales of the design, which helps us to keep the integrity of the project and a common thread to it. Some of the screens are made in bronze, cast bronze, while others are made in timber. The screens are used to modulate light, and the same pattern is applied to the decorative lighting fixtures, which have been customized for the project. The shadows of the screens as they move during the day with the sun is the artwork of the project. The grain of the master plan continues through the public areas of the hotel, which is a composition of courtyards, gardens, and pavilions. The reception is the central pivot, number 2, of the master plan, from where the guests go out to different parts of the hotel. The buildings around the central garden are kept simple, rectilinear architectural forms, which are clad in a pale gray Chinese sandstone. Walls are load-bearing, made with solid blocks of the same sandstone. Movement around the hotel is a carefully orchestrated journey. Dining terraces and restaurants overlook the lake and the forest park across the water. So because the site was not able to accommodate all of the camphor trees that were moved to Shanghai, the city established a forest park across the hotel, across the lake, which took the remaining camphor trees. Views of the landscape and filtered sunlight animate the tall volumes of the main restaurant. While in contrast to the main restaurant, the Chinese restaurant is more internalized and borrows light from courtyards. A few views of the spa reception, which is arranged around its own landscape courtyard, again with its own distinct character. And this restrained material palette has been consistently applied across the project. The reception leads guests on the other side towards the cultural and residential part of Aman Yangyun. The king tree, which is one of the oldest trees that have been moved to Shanghai, has been placed in the center of this larger courtyard, with the library across the tree presiding over the main public lawn. And you can see next to the tree, one of the wells from the old village has been built next to it. The villas are designed as a wall garden with either a contemporary pavilion, which is what you're seeing in the model, or an antique house at its heart. Each villa sits on 3,000 square meters of land. So these villas are clustered in groups of 4 or 6 with entries from a shared courtyards, again creating communities. Thresholds and changes of scale are a recurring device within the architecture of Aman Yangyun. One courtyard leads you to another, and each courtyard has its own character. They form thresholds between private and public. And the gardens, the private gardens within the villas, as I mentioned, they either have an old ancient house or a contemporary pavilion. The landscape elements for the project were designed specifically for this, for Aman Yangyun. And that's one very interesting aspect of this project, because we were given enough time by the client to develop the project and develop different elements of the project. We were able to work with local artisans and craftsmen from across China. Before we even started designing the project, we spent a fair amount of time in China going to the villages from where these houses came from to understand how they were lived in. And we worked with different experts that the clients introduced us, so that we could understand with their help how to design and work with these ancient houses. The contemporary part of the project is as important as the historical. Um, it's been mentioned before that Aman Yangyun is a living museum because the old houses are, each one of them are a museum piece. But what the project allows the guests to do is not just look at these historical objects, but actually to live in them and enjoy them like they used to be lived in at one point in time. So the new guest suite is a key building block of the master plan, which repeats across all villas. And like the traditional Chinese houses, it is an inward looking room with a sequence of spaces punctuated by courtyards. So the form, the internal form of the space, the idea of the courtyards, the idea of a solid external shell and a more delicate interior, they all subtly connect the contemporary with the historical. We've designed all the elements in the room, as I said, down to the soap dishes, the furniture, the lighting. The joinery was also custom designed by the studio. Furniture, just like the landscape elements and the clay, was developed in collaboration with local artisans using traditional Chinese techniques like hemp webbing. The rugs, so each and every element in the project has its own story. We designed the rugs and got them woven by weavers in China. The artifacts within the hotel, and some of these artifacts have very interesting stories, like this bamboo artwork, which was designed by the studio, but the interpretation of it, of our sketches, was misunderstood to our delight by the craftsman. And instead of it being flat, the first prototype that they built was three-dimensional, which was very interesting. Each villa has also extensive basements with tall vaulted volumes and galleries, which borrow light from generous sunken gardens. And the basement provides amenities like cinemas, wine cellars, gyms, in addition to the art galleries. Another interesting aspect, as I mentioned, of this project is the ancient houses from the Ming and Qing dynasty. And we had a team working on understanding these houses and their ordering principles. All 50 of the houses that were dismantled and brought to Shanghai were different in shape and size. But when we studied them in detail, common thread and types started to emerge. The sizes were quite different. Some of the houses were over 900 square meters in floor area, and others were smaller at 300 square meters. So again, to adapt the houses for it to function as a hotel, accommodation, and public areas for the villas, and also bring in modern amenities and weave MEP and fire and seismic requirements was a challenge. The walls of the villas are formed by the new, with the old located within the garden. We had the time, thankfully, to go through prototypes of the antique houses, how to assemble them together, and how to bring light and ventilation into the interiors without disturbing the fabric of the antique house itself. The original team of masons and carpenters who dismantled the houses over 20 years ago, they were responsible and they worked with us to put them back together again. Most of these houses do not have any nails. It was quite important to find the point from where you start dismantling without breaking any of the timber. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Targeted modification to the structure and fabric of these houses were made to make them livable. In certain cases, trusses were shifted to optimize room dimensions. But again, when we were designing the interiors and the architectural shells and adapting them to suit what was requested by the hotel, we were quite careful to make sure that whatever was new was very clearly articulated. Some of the ceilings were omitted to reveal the spectacular roof structure. All the furniture, all the elements which were added to these houses have been kept freestanding to make sure that they feel as if they're temporary occupants of these historical houses. All the new elements that have been inserted within the fabric of the house, they're very honestly expressed in a contemporary architectural language. As I mentioned, within the antique houses, the custom designed furniture and joinery is always freestanding, including the washrooms, emphasizing the transient nature of the furniture that occupies these houses, maybe for the next 50 to 100 years, and then the same houses would have a new occupant in a century, which is so everything that we have added to the houses is temporary, whereas the houses themselves are permanent. The Nanshufang, or the library, is the cultural heart of the project. It's one of the most magnificent antique structures of the property. So this is where a lot of guests congregate, and where there are different cultural activities, whether it's calligraphy or incense burning, that are offered to the guests as part of their stay at the hotel. So this is an old photograph. The trees and the property has matured further in the last couple of years. And the forest would provide the pavilions of Aman Yangyun a natural setting. Our studio is currently designing the larger community around Aman Yangyun, which includes private residences, an artist retreat, a small campus for an Ivy League college, retail promenades and offices. So the client has this larger vision of developing an entire precinct within Shanghai around this project. And the hotel hosted an exhibition of our models in one of their galleries 2 years ago to mark 40 years of our studio's establishment in Singapore. So the project won the UNESCO Prix Versailles World Award for hotels in 2018. The third project I'd like to show you today is the Aman Kyoto, which is one of our oldest ongoing project in the office, and opened last year. And just like Aman Yangyun in 2018, this project won the UNESCO award for hotels last year in 2020. Aman Kyoto has seen a synthesis of many disciplines involved in the approval, design, and construction process over many years. This project has been in the office for close to 25 years. And it's a matter of perseverance and patience to see a project like this to its conclusion. Through these years, the project has started, stopped, started again several times, as the cycles of economy of Japan or changes in the approval process in Kyoto and property ownership came into play. It's located very close to the Golden Pavilion, which meant that the project had to be respectful, obviously, to Japanese culture, but it was both important to the custodians of the temple itself and also the city of Kyoto. Um, I guess to some extent in the nearly 25 years that the project has been in the office, our role as architects became that of guardians of the project, of the property, trying to resist over these years commercial risks which could have resulted in the property being overdeveloped, especially because the site was found by Kerry 25 years ago and then introduced to the hotel as a beautiful location for a hotel. Our client and the operator, they have persisted through these times, held on to the vision, and finally the property opened in November of 2019. So the project has been very important for the office, but it's also been extraordinary because we feel that we've managed to rescue an important garden heritage property belonging to Japan. Many artists and artisans in Kyoto area were involved as well, ranging from lantern makers, potters, tile makers, textile weavers. Just like Aman Yangyun, this is a property which has involved many designers and collaborators. Aman Kyoto is located on the western outskirts of the city. It's near Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion. It's an 80-acre site which has been developed over many decades as a botanical garden, and it's located in a hidden valley surrounded by protected forests. An elaborate locked gate lined in copper forms the entrance to the garden that was discovered by Kerry, or was introduced to Kerry 25 years ago. The original owner had intended to house his collection of textiles in a museum within this garden and had set about planting a large number of ornamental and forest trees. He created clearings and platforms within this garden, some supported by massive walls. Wells and streams and gargoyles were installed to guide the water which was flowing through the property. There's a stream running below it. And moss-covered flagstone paths were laid out by the previous owner as part of the journey to get to the different buildings of the museum. Some of these pathways had huge interlocking stone slabs bridging the watercourses. Large sculptural boulders were placed on the main garden lawn. So the museum did not happen. Regrettably, the previous owner passed away and his family was not interested in continuing with the museum. And that's when the property was introduced to Kerry 25 years ago. He proposed the property to be the site for the next Aman in Japan. And our plans to create the design for this hotel began in 1995. So the first drawings for this hotel go back to 95. So the design of the property makes use of the earlier interventions made in the property by the previous owner, which allowed, and these platforms are what we have used to place the buildings. And it's also been a restraint that we have put on ourselves of how big a property it can be. So the hotel has been designed with 26 rooms, and because that's all that it could accommodate. Conceived as a contemporary version of a traditional ryokan, the design consists of a series of pavilions, each with a distinct function. The arrival, located close to the gate that I showed you earlier. The main living pavilion, which looks out over the garden with the sculptural rock formations. The dining, which looks over the stream that is on the top of the screen. The spa, located internally, opening up to its own garden. And 4 two-story pavilions housing a total of 26 guest suites have been placed on the platforms overlooking the main garden. The architecture has been kept visually simple to allow nature and landscape to dominate. It's not about the buildings, it's about the garden. The buildings have to be the backdrop. The materials and proportions of these pavilions are intended to feel Japanese while not being traditional. The entrance to the property remains through the original gate, the copper gate, which is in its original location. Guests are received in a small arrival pavilion, which is very simply furnished. And just like Aman Yangyun and Maldives, we've designed all the furniture, the light fittings, and the accessories for this project. The original avenues, now restored, leads guests through the gardens to their suites, and it's a testament to the contractors. They preserved the moss which was on the rocks. During construction, they built shelters for the moss, and after the project was finished, the moss was laid back. They also had construction vehicles that were designed specifically for this project that could go over the stones without damaging them. So there was a lot of effort put in to preserve and maintain the garden. These parks allow the gardens to be experienced in all seasons, whether it is autumn, as you can see in this image, or winter. The guest pavilions are two-story structures which open up to the gardens, kept very, very simple. Entry into the private lobbies for the guest rooms is from the rear of the pavilion. And the lobbies connect the 2 floors, the upper and the lower suites. The interiors, just like the architecture, again, has been kept very simple. It's filled with light and opens onto framed garden views. Internal walls are lined with a Japanese timber, a type of ash, and sliding panels visually connect the bathroom and the bedroom, borrowing views of the gardens. Two of the larger suites are located on higher platforms overlooking the forest canopy. Few views of the suite itself. And each of the suites has a Japanese and a Western dining room. The living pavilion forms the social hub of the property, and it overlooks the main garden with the rock formations. This pavilion opens onto a large timber dining terrace and a sunken fire pit. Within the pavilion, it's been designed as a lofty space with the structure of the building clearly expressed. The spa is nestled within the garden itself with internal and external onsen bathing areas. The reception for the spa. The main restaurant is located outside the main property gate, and it is open to both in-house guests and visitors. Commissioned artwork announces the arrival to the pavilion. You can see the lights which have been designed for the project. That's a few views of the restaurant. So Aman Kyoto has been a very interesting journey for the office, and each of these three projects represent a different region of the world, a different brief, and a different response. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Architect Tanuj, for taking us through three extremely beautiful projects, through the process, through techniques of making, through a language of craft and precision that addresses the culture of the place where it's situated, while translating across regions. Thanks also for such an engaging narrative. With this, we would like to thank both our speakers, Architect Sanjay Mohe and Architect Tanuj, and we would like to open our session for conversation. I'm delighted to introduce our moderators for this session, two talented young architects from Mumbai and Bengaluru. Architect Chinmay Gawade graduated from the School of Environment and Architecture, Mumbai. He is the co-founder of Studio by the Window, a research-based design studio focused on reimagining co-housing in India through the lens of affordability and sociability. Our second moderator is architect Neha Harish, who is a recent graduate from RV College of Architecture, Bengaluru. Neha has an interest in collective architectural endeavors. Currently, she is a co-flaneur at Three Flaneurs, an architectural design and travel collective. Welcome to Design Conversation, Neha and Chinmay.
Thank you, Ms. Varna. We'd like to start this session firstly by thanking our two architects for your wonderful presentations that gave us a great insight into your practice philosophies. And I'd like to begin my question to Architect Tanuj. The projects undertaken by the firm are spread across different nations, and yet there is a clear transformation between the traditional building forms of the region as well as your projects take on the process itself. So could you give us a little insight on the process that is actually followed behind the beginning of the conceptualization for any of these projects?
Neha, the most important aspect to it is time. It's very important that we try to work on projects where the client is ready to give us time. So although being in Singapore, for example, we've been offered projects in China for a long time. We were waiting for the right client to come our way who would not want everything yesterday. So it's important to have time for you, we feel it's very important to have time to immerse ourselves and to understand where we are, to get to know people that we from those countries, to get to know them, their culture better. And then we, as I said, there is an intuitive response that happens that we look for each of these projects, which comes from having spent time there. We also work with experts. We always collaborate with architects from the place where we are building, and they become a very important source of information and knowledge to a project to make sure that we are responding appropriately. But there are common threads of sensibilities about the idea of editing, the idea of keeping things simple, that are applicable across different regions, cultures, and climates. So we take those common principles across our projects.
Right. Thank you, sir. Chinmay, would you like to take the next question?
Yeah, first of all, thank you both of you for your wonderful presentations. My question is to architect Mohe. The design philosophy of Mindspace architects talks about respecting the five senses. As correctly stated by an author, Ioannis Palasma, in his book Eyes of the Skin, architecture has become oculocentric, causing the feeling of detachment and alienation. So, how does one move towards a more multisensory architecture?
Well, I think that's the fundamental of sensing the work. It's not about the looks; it's about the feel. So when we sort of start designing, we the how it looks, it comes much later. How it feels is probably the most important thing. So that's where you start looking at how light comes in, how the place smells, how you get breeze onto your body, and then you start crafting the space around that, taking all those elements into the senses into the account. So it's about combining 5 elements of ancients as Panchamahabhutas, what you call it, and then 5 senses, and try to create a story out of it.
Yes, so I think that would definitely be most of the approach that we've seen in your different projects as well.
Yeah.
And that also leads me to asking you another question about having visited some of the projects myself in the city. I would also like to know how the usage of light plays an important role in your projects, and how would you also say that the usage of such immaterial materials would be in your projects?
Yeah, actually, we spend a lot of time trying to study the light. I mean, now you have all these softwares even to study how the sun would move from morning to evening, from January to December, and you can almost judge it exactly how it would. But when it comes to actual realizing it on the site, if you use a white wall against a brick wall, the entire quality of light changes. The absorption increases. So every time when you start, doing, even after doing so many buildings, we are not sure about it, the amount of light which would come in, and it's always a discovery whether to make the width of the skylight, whether it should be 300 or 400 or 500. So those are the things which you keep inventing, keep observing. But what's important about light is that's one element which keeps changing all the time. Otherwise, what you create is more static, because what you build tends to stay the same. What really changes is the light, the nature, and the people who occupy the place. So in that sense, handling the light and connecting with emotions, that becomes a very important exercise in our office.
Yeah. My next question is to architect Tanuj. I would like to ask you that often in the field, architects are hurried by the demands of the commercial practice. So how does one engage into a conversation about the slow and unhurried process of design? And like the way you described your projects to be, it's sort of like a meditative process of designing. So could you elaborate on the process of how does one go about?
I think it's about choosing, if you have the luxury of choosing your client or choosing a project, and if you know that there is a project which is designed or it has come across you in a way that you can see that you are not going to get a good outcome out of it because the client does not have the patience for it to be designed properly, then those are the projects that you have to be careful about taking on. We have been lucky to have clients who've given us time uh, for us to immerse ourselves in the project and allow them to mature and develop in our studio. because it's not about putting a larger team on a project. You need time to just dream a bit for each project. You need to, like, because of COVID, for example, we're not able to go on site as often as we'd like to. When we were working on the project in Shanghai, we were on site every 3 weeks. We've just started working on a project in Saudi, and I was on site when a few days before the last flight out of that country. And the whole team needs to spend 2 weeks in that desert in a tent to understand it, to start to understand it, and work with people who live there for the site to speak to us. So that's very important, and you can't do that if you are in a hurry.
Yeah, that makes it so much more contextual and second. Yeah. So that brings me to my next question. That is, having had all these experiences, this is to actually both of you, as to how both of your practices have evolved, and I would like to know from both of you what were some of your inspirations and personal experiences that inform your architectural practice.
Tanuj?
Sanjay, why don't you go first?
Actually, there are several elements. You are talking about the forces which are acting onto the thing. I mean, if I get your question right.
No, I'm talking about your own personal experiences while working and your inspirations that are informing your practice. Like, was there something in specific that you've gone about?
Well, I mean, there are several things, but what happened to us is I moved to Bangalore in '83, and that time, luckily, we had a group called Base Group, and about 6-7 of us architects who used to meet every week. And that time, Mr. Doshi used to come for IIM, and then Mr. Korea was building his house in Koromangala. So we were lucky enough to sort of interact with them almost on a regular basis. Every time they would come, they would meet us. And that was a huge learning process. And it's about questioning, it's about gaining confidence. Because when you start discussing your project with like-minded architects who are critical about your work with good intention, and you learn to sort of, learn from it, improve from it. So that is something which made a huge difference to the way I started, dealing with the whole idea of designing. And then there are several things which keep happening. You learn from clients, you learn the different technologies and things like that. So it's a continuous process of learning. Like what I was mentioning, even about the light, you're never confident about it when you are designing, and that's how you keep observing things. And I feel if you just look at many times it's about the way of seeing. And if you look at every object around you as an idea, how it has evolved, and then rather than just the visual qualities, what made that object happen, you tend to discover so many things, and then you start sort of imbibing that into your work. So that has been the process. So it's a learning all the time. But as Tanuj said, that many times all of us don't have that luxury of time. Many times you have to take certain decisions, and in the process you're trying to gain time. So what has to be decided first, you decide first. Like in that memorial, those ashes had to be buried within certain, because that was one of the religious thing required. It had to be buried within 15 days. So we had to decide that location, and because of that, we had to decide almost the overall scheme in a very short. So sometimes you end up doing that. Ideally, you should, during that process, you keep developing certain other things which are slightly more flexible, which allows you to gain time. So I think Anush can.
Yeah, for me, Chinmay, I feel that um, I've had many gurus to thank in my journey till today as an architect. As a student, Professor Doshi in Ahmedabad, Professor Varki, who played a very important part in my life as a student of architecture. And then my guru who took me under my wings, that is Kerry, who I worked with for the last 20 years. They have been an inspiration. I think travels have been an inspiration. Travels across India when I was studying architecture, backpacking with a tent around the world as a student of architecture has been an inspiration. And so it actually helps you sharpen your intuitive responses to places, especially if you sketch, if you draw, you tend to get to the essence of what you're looking at. So that's been quite important. And I think for the practice, it is important to always remain humble. It is important to always have, as an architect, it's always important to have a doubt in your mind. Can I do this thing better? Am I doing the right thing? And you need to ask this to yourself every day in order for you to question yourself and improve further.
Yes, absolutely, sir. I think both of the points that you guys are bringing across to us right now is so important for us, especially as young designers who are starting off. And the next question as well to both the architects would be, as mentors, what would be your advice to the upcoming practices as well as the young architectural students?
I start first.
Yes, Sanjay?
Yeah, I feel this whole commitment is probably the most important thing. It's about getting involved in the work, right? From the, like what Tanuj was talking about, spending time on the site. Those are the things which are extremely important to understand the surroundings, or how you intervene into the site. Every rock, every tree, every the wind, the breeze, the water flow on the site. One has to understand every measurable thing, and I feel these are all measurable. And then beyond that, the functionality is a measurable, and beyond that, you go into immeasurable, and you say that I have to create, you have to do something to inspire somebody. Now, that whole idea of inspiring is a immeasurable thing, which nobody can tell you if you add this plus this, you are going to create something inspiring. So that's something you involve you develop your own language, you evolve your own language, and that it happens through observation, through hard work, and it's not only the designing part, because I feel that the designing is only part of the whole process, because it's a collaboration between so many aspects. It's first of all, it's working within the studio with so many different architects, different designers, coming to agreement. Then you have to convince to the client, you have to learn from client. Then you have to have engineers who would work with you and then understand exactly. So there are a lot of discussion, a lot of fights which happen. And then eventually it has to be built by the right contractor. So there is this tension all throughout, which is probably, it may not happen so much outside India, but in India we keep struggling. We are not sure till the last moment whether the drawing would be followed or not. So you have to keep visiting. You have to keep sort of encouraging the builder, the client, and the whole team, that finally you get what you really want to, and it's a struggle. So it doesn't stop at when you freeze the design, but it continues till, like what I showed, that temple. It is still, we are not sure whether they are going to really do exactly the way we are going to. We have visualized it, because That's something which needs that constant struggle, but that's the fun. It's something which, so to answer you in one word, you have to be absolutely committed, and there has to be a lot of hard work.
Yeah, no, I would say, I think it's important for young architects to travel. It's important to sketch. It's important to keep an open mind. Um there are so many aspects as an architect, so many forces that influence the design process. And in our experience as a studio, most of those forces that influence the design that we set out to do have been positive in the end, because that push and pull between the client, between the engineers, between the architect actually helps to make the project better and stronger. If we were given a project with no budget, I don't think we'll be able to do a good job, because even a constraint like budgets actually helps to improve the project, because you need to sharpen your pencil to do a better job and accommodate all of those constraints. So I think that's quite important. But I would say that to the young architects listening, don't be in a hurry. Good things, good design takes time. Have patience, immerse yourself, and most importantly, have fun. Don't treat it as a job, because if you have fun putting together and being an architect, um, you will enjoy yourself, and the work will happen. It will become more intuitive and seamless. So very important to have
That's
fun.
probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll be taking a few audience questions, and the others that won't be addressed here would be addressed on either Facebook or the YouTube or Instagram channels. The first question that is being asked to Architect Tanuj is that how do you as a firm manage to achieve the quality of work in all your projects, and does it become expensive to do so?
Well, time is money.
Yeah.
So when we ask for time, it obviously costs a little more. But this goes back to some of the early slides that I showed in the presentation, whether you treat architecture as a business or whether you're in the business of architecture. I think we strongly believe that we are in the business of architecture, and we don't treat architecture as a business itself. So we're very careful about the projects that we take on. We've kept our office small, although we have opportunities to grow our office to multiple countries, but we've kept it small to make sure that we can give every project the attention that it deserves. And we enjoy doing what we're doing. So it all comes together somehow.
Yes, absolutely, sir. And I would also like to tell the rest of the questions that we have received that we'd also be answering them a little while later. So check out for the platforms as well for the answers. So thank you for this session. We had a great conversation with both of you, as well as the presentations that you had for us. And I'd like to turn it over to Gautami and Architect Varna.
Our deep appreciation and thanks to architects Sanjay Mohe and architect Tanuj Goenka for being so generous with your time and sharing your inspiring design journeys at Design United in this very special mentorship series and motivating all of us. Special thanks to architect Medapa from Mindspace and Carol from KHA for facilitating this presentation. Our thanks to our moderators for the thoughtful moderation, Clayworks, DU, VSLE team, and our audience. Have a wonderful day ahead. Saakshi from Design United team will share the upcoming series of events. Thanks.
Thank you to architect Sanjay Mohe and architect Tanuj Goenka. It's been such an honor to have
both of you on our platform today, and I'm certain that our viewers have taken back much value from your inspiring work. We have received a lot of wonderful audience questions. Unfortunately, since we have run out of time, we will be taking them on our Instagram page. So please look out for that on our IG. We'd like to thank our moderators, Neha and Chinmay, for engaging us with such a thought-provoking conversation. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to the Clayworks team for supporting this webinar and all of our webinars. So far, Design United has completed 35 installments of design conversations, and we have many more exciting speakers lined up, with designers across the spectrum joining us to share their thoughts. Later this month, we have Pooja Saxena, a designer and font engineer, alongside Ojaswi Mohanty and Joe De Bardmaker. This will be a special session on typeface and typography. On 30th of January, we have Shefali Balwani and Robert Berijit, alongside Seher Aziz, who will be joining us from Mumbai and Karachi. Please follow our speakers on Instagram. Do also fill in a feedback form that'll pop up on your browser about today's webinar. Join us and stay inspired. Follow us on our social media to know of our upcoming conversations. Until next time, thank you, stay safe, and take care. I'd like to request the speakers to just hang on for a minute and stay online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Architect Mohe and Architect Tanuj, it would be really wonderful if you could share your thoughts on DU as a platform and your experience on the webinar today. You can take a minute to put your thoughts together. Thanks.
I think it is a wonderful exercise, and I mean, what this COVID did is probably to give platform for sharing knowledge from from different sources, from different places, and we got to hear, even for me, I could hear to so many masters which we have been sort of Moshe Shabdi and so many of them, and it really sort of gave so much of exposure and to learn. So sitting at home, that too. So this is a wonderful exercise, and please keep it up. What you're doing is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you, Architect Mohe. Thank you so much. Architect Tanuj?
No, I would concur with Sanjay, what he's saying. I think it's important it's a great exposure for the younger architects and students. It's similar to being in a library. We did not have the internet when we were studying architecture. Our source of information used to be the library, and platforms like this help in the students getting to know what's happening around their comfort zone or around the ecosystem that they are in. So it's very important. The more exposure you have to curated content, the better it is for the students.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been an honor having you both, and also Neha and Chinmay. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you to Gautami for facilitating this entire webinar, and to Sanjana for helping with the technical stuff. All right, with that, we conclude today's session.
Thank you, Saakshi. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.